We're back with Bedtime Stories, Grownup Edition, Concrete Jungle, Bonus Edition 1. At around 10 Sunday morning, Regina awoke to Angela asleep on the couch with several pieces of paper on the floor beside her. Regina picked them up and realized that they were part of a letter to Kit. She sat them on the table, went to the Keurig, and made herself a cup of coffee. While the coffee brewed, she looked over at the papers and thought to herself, I can handle the smoke if I get caught reading this. She picked up the pages and realized that they began mid-story. That wasn't an issue because she was there for the whole thing. Amora and I had been together for 2 years, the year she graduated. I still had a year remaining at A&T, and she was 1 year ahead of me. She tried to get me to move off campus with her, but I just couldn't do it. I knew how my mother would feel about it, but most importantly, I knew how God would feel about it. Now, don't get me wrong, I was taking Shorty down, so we were already outside of God's will. But shacking was a bridge too far. I wish I would have stood on those principles later in life, but we all have to hit our head on brick walls at some point. The plan was for me to join the force after I graduated. She would remain in Greensboro while she pursued her master's degree. Then she would relocate with me, find a job, and we'd make plans to marry. The stipulation was we still wouldn't live together. She felt like this made me a mama's boy, and she suggested that I was living to please my parents instead of living to please myself. The truth is she never understood me. She didn't understand what mattered most to me, and she never respected my values. In the end, all that really mattered to her was what she wanted, and she never took the time to actually get to know me. During my senior year, she took a year off, partied, worked, and after I graduated, she eventually and reluctantly agreed to the plan. I joined the force and became roommates with my boy Roderick, who was at that point a lieutenant. Amora started her master's program after I relocated. What should have taken 2 years ended up taking 3 years for her to earn her master's degree in public administration. 6 months later, she found a job in an apartment, and 6 months after that, I proposed. At that point, we'd been together for 7 years. I should have known that something was wrong when I asked for her father's blessing, and he gave me a lecture that included Proverbs 21:9. It is better to dwell in the corner of a rooftop than with a brawling woman in a wide house. Regina laughed out loud and woke up Angela. Angela said in a sleepy voice, well, let me know if you read anything that isn't true. I'm going to hop in the shower and head over to the Salvation Center of Dallas for the 11 a.m. service. Want to come? Regina said, no, I agreed to Zoom with LJ and watch our service remotely together. Why not stay in and watch with me? Angela said, well, I was telling you last night / this morning, you wasn't knocked out. The Dallas branch is headed by Pastor Corey Thompson. You remember CT? Regina said, oh, Robbins Jr. and Tanya's cousin? Angela says, yes. Regina says, the one that Steph was dating? Angela said, yes. When he found out that I was going to be in Dallas, he asked me to stop in for his service and to meet with the ladies for the women's group and have lunch with them. And I agreed. Regina said, oh, okay. Well, have fun, sis. Can I finish reading this letter while you're gone, though? Angela laughed and said, knock yourself out, as she headed to the shower. Regina took the letter and her things back to her own room, where she got comfortable in her bed and resumed reading. I started feeling a little uneasy when I practically had to beg Roderick to be my best man. But I knew something was up when my mother asked me to push the wedding back a whole year. Trusting my mother's instincts, I presented the idea to Amora, and she lost it. I explained to her that with me just passing the sergeant's exam, it would give me time to get settled in my promotion. It would also give me more money for the wedding. It would give us both time to save for the wedding and our future house, and it would alleviate the strain on our parents' budget for this huge, illustrious wedding that Amora was planning. She was not happy about having to wait another year to be my wife after 8 years of being together. But eventually, reluctantly, she relented. Over the next 3 months, things seemed to be going fine. The wedding plans were underway. I was promoted to sergeant. Amora, my parents, my siblings, her parents were all there to see me promoted, and Amora pinned me. But just 3 months later, her mother had a massive stroke. Because she's an only child, she had to go back to her hometown to help her father care for her mother. She took a leave of absence from her job and was with her family for 6 months. During that 6 months, I learned that my fiance was more concerned with appearances than her mother's health. On every phone call, there was complaints. Her father wasn't doing enough. Her mother wasn't getting better fast enough. Her mother's siblings weren't doing enough to help and support her. All of her friends back home had husbands and children and were never available to hang out with her when she did have free time. And on and on and on. Thank God, her mother survived. She returned, job was secure, and she could go back to planning the wedding of her dreams. Unfortunately, it had to be pushed back another year. One day at work, I got a call to investigate a strangulation. The young lady's name was Danielle. Danielle was the same age as my younger sister, Anya, 21. LJ and I responded to the call, and when we got there, Danielle was a mess. Her boyfriend, Bruce, was 36 years old, 10 years my senior, and about my size. He was entirely too old to be in a relationship with a 21-year-old and too big to be putting his hands on anybody, let alone a woman. I was livid, but I maintained my composure and remained professional. I explained the laws and her rights, encouraged her to press charges and get a restraining order, but like many women, especially young women, Danielle was too distressed, afraid, embarrassed, and ashamed. So I provided her with a list of resources and my card. I told her to call 911 in the event of another emergency and to call me if she needed any help or support. When I got off work, I went by Amora's for dinner. It was heavy on me, and she could tell something was up. So she asked, and I shared. She immediately began accusing me of having feelings for Danielle, a young woman that I had just met, the same age as my sister, which absolutely made her off limits in my mind. But for her, 5 years wasn't off limits, and she completely disregarded the fact that any such behavior would be grounds for termination. At my job, we argued, I left her apartment and went home. At home, I told Roderick about it, and he told me not only did I need to leave work at work, but I needed to stop sharing with Amora. Only those in law enforcement could really understand the emotions associated with the job. He reiterated his opinion that Amora was just not a good match for me, and I took the former to heart and ignored the latter. I never mentioned work to Amora again, but I did call the Queen Mother. My mother has always been a queen in my eyes. So much so that myself, my siblings, and most of our friends call her the Queen Mother when she isn't around to hear us. She is a regal, confident, intelligent, beautiful, loving, God-fearing, no-nonsense woman who taught me everything that I know about the delicate yet powerful nature of God's best creation, woman. I pray that one day you'll get to meet her. Her intuition is impeccable, and her heart is larger than the continent. She can spot a snake from a mile away. She can read your soul with a touch of her hand. She was in full support of me joining the force. Her only concern was that I guard my heart. When I called her, she prayed with me and prayed for Danielle. Several months passed with no word from Danielle, and when she did call, she needed help. She needed a place to stay. Bruce had beat her up again and put her out in her underwear. She had nowhere to go. No family, no friends. I called LJ. LJ called Regina, and Regina agreed to let her stay in her spare guest room until we could come up with a better plan. I went and picked up Regina. Regina grabbed some clothes from her closet, and together we picked up Danielle and took her back to Regina's apartment. When I got home, Amora was waiting for me in the living room. Apparently, Roderick had let her in, and she was determined to wait for me until I returned. She was in a full-on rage, accusing me of cheating, and when I explained to her what happened, she had the unmitigated gall to ask me why I didn't call her for help. When I asked if she would have given Danielle clothes out of her closet and let her stay in her guest room, she said, "Hell no, but I would have rode with you to the shelter." When I explained that shelters don't take new admits in the middle of the night, she said, well, she should have waited until the morning. I was livid. I told her that she was not only unreasonable, but she was being selfish and cold-hearted, and this was something that we were going to have to work through in premarital counseling. As a man who was called to help people, I couldn't even imagine marrying a woman whose first reaction after hearing Danielle's story wouldn't be how she could help and to pray. She stormed out of my apartment, and I didn't hear from her for a week. Somehow, we managed to work through this in premarital counseling. Apparently, the real issue, according to the pastor, was that Amora is an only child who's used to getting her own way. The multiple delays in the wedding were having an adverse effect on her, and even the hint of another woman was causing her to be jealous. His suggestion was that we spend more quality time together and pray more. The wedding was scheduled for less than 3 months away. I wish you could see the look on my face right now. My prayer since then has been that God never allows me to fall for another jealous woman.